Stop right there. If you think you know everything about betrayal, think again. This is not just another story of infidelity. This is a brutal, real, and eye-opening journey into the dark side of cheating. And trust me, once you hear what happened, you'll never look at relationships the same way again. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and drop a comment below. Have you ever suspected something wasn't right in your relationship? If so, you'll want to stick around. Because today, we're exposing the silent destruction of trust, the forbidden confessions, and the devastating reality of infidelity. Daniel was just an ordinary husband, living what he thought was a stable married life. But when tiny red flags started piling up, late-night calls, secretive texts, unexplained absences, he knew something wasn't right. Was he overthinking, or was his wife hiding something? What he discovered next would shatter everything he believed about love, loyalty, and betrayal. Are you ready for the truth? Because once you hear this, you'll never ignore the warning signs again. I always believed trust was the foundation of our marriage. Clara and I had built a life together, full of laughter, struggles, and shared dreams. But lately, something felt off. She was there, but not really. Always lost in her phone, texting someone with a faint smile that wasn't for me. At first, I told myself I was overthinking it. But the late nights at work, the vague excuses, the sudden emotional distance, it all started forming a pattern I couldn't ignore. Then one night, I woke up to the sound of her voice. Soft, hushed, almost secretive. I glanced at the clock. Past midnight. My gut tightened as I listened from the doorway. I could hear the warmth in her tone, a kind of excitement I hadn't heard in a long time. When she noticed me, she froze. "Just a coworker," she said with a forced chuckle, but I wasn't convinced. My mind started racing, connecting dots I didn't want to see. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. After all, who wants to believe they're living in an infidelity story? But the signs were there: late nights, secretive phone calls, a sudden shift in intimacy. And the worst part? That sinking feeling in my stomach wouldn't go away. It clung to me like a bad dream, whispering that my wife might be slipping away into something I wasn't part of. Maybe I was wrong. Or maybe I was waking up to a truth I wasn't ready to face. But here's the thing about suspicion. It doesn't fade, it festers. The more I tried to push it aside, the more it consumed me. I found myself watching her closely, analyzing every movement, every excuse. Who was she always texting? Why did she seem so distant? The truth was just beyond my reach, but I knew one thing for certain. Something was happening, and I needed to find out what before it was too late. Eric wasn't just a coworker. He was charming, confident, and had a way of making people feel special. I'd never met him, but I knew his name. Clara mentioned him casually at first, always with a little too much enthusiasm. "Eric said the funniest thing today," or "Eric helped me with a project." It seemed harmless. But deep down, I sensed something shifting. She laughed more when she spoke about him. She seemed lighter, almost like she was rediscovering a version of herself I hadn't seen in years. I wish I could say I was imagining things, but I know how these stories of infidelity begin. At first, it's nothing. A joke, a lingering conversation, a harmless connection. Then, one day, it becomes something more. Clara never admitted it, not to me, not even to herself. But I could see it in her eyes. She felt alive with him. That's what scared me the most. Not just the possibility of cheating, but the idea that she might be falling for someone else right in front of me. I told myself relationships go through phases. Maybe she just needed space. Maybe it was work stress, a midlife crisis, anything but what my instincts were screaming. But every time I saw her texting, smiling at her phone, staying late at work, I knew she was stepping onto dangerous ground. She convinced herself it was harmless fun, a distraction from the monotony of marriage. But isn't that how all cheating stories start? A little excitement, a little thrill, until suddenly, there's no turning back? I could feel the weight of something I didn't want to name. Maybe she wasn't cheating yet, but she was on the edge, teetering between loyalty and betrayal. And the worst part? She didn't even seem to realize it. Or maybe she did, and she just didn't care. It started with small things. Coffee breaks that ran too long. Inside jokes I wasn't part of. Whispered conversations that ended when I entered the room. Clara and Eric weren't just coworkers anymore. Their connection had shifted, becoming something unspoken, yet obvious. I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was being paranoid. But deep down, I knew. The line between friendship and betrayal had begun to blur, and I was the only one pretending not to see it. I watched as she got dressed with more care, picked outfits she hadn't worn in years, sprayed perfume before work as if she were going on a date. My stomach tightened every time she mentioned another work meeting that ran late. And then there were the texts, constant, always met with a smirk or a silent chuckle. Whenever I asked who it was, she gave me the same answer. Just work stuff. But I knew better. Infidelity and cheating don't start in the bedroom. They start in moments like these: stolen glances, innocent touches, and a growing excitement for someone who isn't your spouse. The hardest part was that she didn't even try to hide it anymore. Not fully. It was as if she believed that as long as she wasn't physically cheating, it wasn't real. But I saw it. The way her eyes lit up when she spoke about him, the way she drifted away from me, little by little. I was losing her, one text, one lingering look, one laugh at a time. And the worst part? She was letting it happen. I didn't have proof, not yet. But proof wasn't what I needed. I needed the truth. And whether she was ready to admit it or not, we were heading towards something neither of us could undo. Doubt is a quiet killer. It sneaks into your mind, whispering things you don't want to believe, making you question everything. I tried to ignore it, but the signs were everywhere. Deleted messages, locked screens, sudden mood shifts. Clara was slipping away, and I couldn't just sit back and watch it happen. That's when I made the decision. If my gut was right, I needed proof. And if I was wrong, well, then at least I'd finally have peace of mind. So I did what any desperate man would do. I hired a private investigator. The results didn't take long. A few days later, I had pictures, timestamps, and text records. It wasn't a full-blown affair yet, but it was enough. Coffee dates that weren't on her calendar. Late nights at the office that ended in a bar. Conversations filled with things a married woman shouldn't be saying to another man. And the way she looked at him in those pictures? That was the look she used to give me. That realization hit harder than any cold, hard evidence ever could. Clara was at war with herself. I could see it. One moment, she was affectionate, trying to act normal. The next, she was distant, lost in thought, probably wondering if she was making a mistake or if she just didn't care anymore. The guilt was eating away at her, but so was the desire. And that's the cruel part about cheating. It doesn't just happen in one big, dramatic moment. It creeps up slowly until suddenly you're standing on the edge, wondering how you got there. I held the evidence in my hands, But what was I supposed to do with it? Confront her? Wait for her to confess? Part of me still wanted to believe there was a way to fix this. But deep down, I already knew we were past the point of no return. There comes a moment when you can't ignore the truth anymore. I sat across from Clara, the evidence laid out in front of me. Printed messages, photos, timestamps. My hands were steady, but inside, I was shaking. "Explain this," I said, my voice calmer than I expected. She blinked, her face pale, her fingers tightening around the edge of the table. For a split second, I saw it, the desperate search for a way out, a way to deny, to twist, to pretend. But there was no escape. Not this time. At first, she tried. She laughed, shook her head, called me paranoid. "It's not what you think," she said, her voice weak, uncertain. But the weight of the evidence was crushing. One by one, the excuses crumbled. The deleted texts, the hidden meetings, the way she looked at him when she thought no one was watching. And then, finally, the silence. Her walls came crashing down, and in their place was something I hadn't seen before: fear. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she whispered. "But that's the thing about infidelity and betrayal, no one ever does." A part of me wanted to scream, to throw something, to demand an explanation that would somehow make it all make sense. But what could she say? That she was lonely? That she missed feeling wanted? That Eric made her feel alive in a way I no longer did? I already knew the answers, and none of them changed the reality staring me in the face. My wife had betrayed me, and no amount of regret would undo that. Now, the choice was mine. Do I forgive? Do I fight for something that's already broken? Or do I walk away from a marriage built on lies? The room was heavy with unspoken words, but one thing was clear. Whatever happened next, nothing would ever be the same again. The truth doesn't just set you free. It rips you apart first. As I stood there, staring at Clara, the weight of her betrayal settled in. She wasn't just my wife. She was the woman I had built a life with, the person I trusted above all else. And yet, here we were. The confession had already escaped her lips. But what now? Did she expect me to fight for us? To pretend we could go back to the way things were? I wasn't sure what hurt more, the betrayal itself or the realization that she was willing to risk everything for a fleeting moment with someone else. Eric wasn't a mystery anymore. His name was out in the open, his role in this disaster undeniable. He was the charming coworker, the one who made my wife question everything we had built. But he wasn't the real problem. The real problem was that Clara let him in. She let herself cross that invisible line, one secret at a time, until there was nothing left between us but broken trust. And now, as she stood there, waiting for me to decide our fate, I realized something painful. This wasn't just about her mistake. It was about my dignity, my self-respect, and whether I was willing to sacrifice them to hold on to someone who had already let me go. There was no dramatic goodbye, no screaming, no grand gestures. Just the quiet, heavy truth. I told Clara I couldn't do it. That I wouldn't live in a marriage where I had to wonder, every day, if I was enough. Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't comfort her. That wasn't my job anymore. She made her choices. Now I was making mine. As I walked away, the weight in my chest didn't disappear, but something inside me shifted. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something new. And as for Clara and Eric, they would have to live with the wreckage they created. I was done picking up the pieces for someone who didn't care enough to protect what we had. So, now that you've heard the truth, let me ask you this. How much are you willing to ignore before it's too late? Infidelity doesn't happen overnight. It starts with small secrets, white lies, and justifications that seem harmless until they aren't. Would you be able to spot the signs before your world comes crashing down? Or worse, would you have the courage to walk away when the truth finally hits? Daniel made his choice. He chose self-respect over empty promises, truth over comfortable lies. But what about you? If you were in his shoes, would you fight for a love that betrayed you, or would you walk away and rebuild from scratch? There's no easy answer, but there is one undeniable fact. Nothing destroys a relationship faster than deception. Let this be a wake-up call. If something feels off, trust your instincts. If you suspect lies, seek the truth. And if you've ever been in a situation like this, drop a comment below. Your story might just help someone else open their eyes before it's too late. And before you go, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share this video with someone who needs to hear this. Because the truth about infidelity and cheating isn't just painful, it's life-changing.